Alright, strangers, so there's this game out there called Magic the Gathering. Don't ask me why the magic is gathering. I guess it sounds really cool if you're a high-level nerd living in Seattle in 1993. But anyway, Magic is the first and generally considered best collectible card game, which inspired all the others like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Hearthstone, and like, why does everything have a card game now? Despite being over 25 years old and having a stupid name like Magic the Gathering, the game is more popular now than it's ever been. Popular new sets have continued to bring in players, spurred on by the fancy schmancy new program Magic Arena, which allows people to play online, and a few new formats have meant that the game hasn't really died out in paper in the slightest. Magic Arena, by all metrics, has been a rollicking success, raking in over 5 million unique new accounts, and this has spurred the controlling company to try and make Magic from a small pro scene into a real esport, which frankly it's kind of silly it wasn't before. Beyond this, there is a massive community surrounding the game which discusses it and talks about it, and this supports dozens of content creators right here on YouTube who make a wide variety of content, generally just about Magic the Gathering. The game has been featured at the Game Awards and is starting to branch off into MMOs and other kinds of content. This is a really big freaking deal. I personally got into Magic a little over a year ago, around October of 2018. That's how long I've been playing the game. And this means that I'm not really qualified to join the illustrious batch of content creators. I'm not skilled enough to impress with my play or my card analysis. If you want input on the game's most basic design principles and how it works, there are better authorities to go to. I haven't been around long enough to really be able to tell you the lore in super intricate detail. We all know I'm not entertaining enough to expect people to just want to watch me play it, but unlike all these guys who have been here since forever, I just got into the game. Just got hooked, just got interested, just got committed. Which means I might be qualified to talk to you on what is the appeal of Magic the Gathering. Starting with the obvious, Magic is a game. People play games because they are fun, and Magic is indeed fun. The main advantage for having a game that's been around long as this one is that the designers have had a chance to figure out what really makes it work and makes it fun. The rules of Magic actually haven't changed a whole lot since the game's inception, but the types of cards that get printed have. These days, the people who make Magic try and make the game both reactive and dynamic. Now, whether or not card design is currently good or bad is subject of hot debate that I'm not going to get into, but I will say that I have had immense amount of joy and fun getting the game, especially when I first sat down playing my first few matches with the people who were teaching me with really cheap common cards that you can get anywhere. I was laughing whether or not I won or lost. Individual games can last anywhere between 2 and 20 minutes depending on what type of deck you're playing, and you can play many different types of decks that match your playstyle. Maybe you want to go as fast as possible and rush down your opponent. Maybe you rather be reactive. In Magic, you can actually cast certain spells on your opponent's turn. So maybe you just want to kill their creatures, counter their spells, own the board. Maybe you rather set up some grindy value engine and wear them out in a game of attrition. Maybe the fun for you comes in setting up some crazy combo, innovating something that no one's ever seen before, and winning all in one fell swoop when all of your pieces come together. These are all things you can do in the game. These different styles of play allow the game to appeal to a lot of different people at once. And the theme of player freedom, choice, and creativity is one we're going to come back to a bunch of times during this video. All the current cards are fun to play. Alright, most of the current cards are fun to play with, and it's totally possible to just throw together some bulk commons and uncommons, really cheap, inexpensive stuff, get together with your friends and have some fun decks to play with for hours. But what if you don't want to just have fun? What if you want to win? Well, then you're in luck, because Magic has had a thriving competitive scene since 1994. Tons of players want to find that perfect combination of cards that will win as often as possible, but rarely will there be a singular best deck. And if there is, that means something needs to get banned. Certain decks counter other decks, and new cards are released every 3 to 4 months, which means as soon as a new set is released, this diverse and new crazy meta will form with powerful decks, decks designed to beat those decks, and decks designed to beat those decks. If you've watched any type of competitive living game like League of Legends or StarCraft, you'll immediately recognize this process. The mechanical depth of the game, compared with the veteran skill of its top players in the shiny new interface of Magic Arena, often make for a game that's more enjoyable to watch than to play. With at least 4 new sets a year and cards rotating out of the premier format every year, this means that we have a constantly changing and fresh meta. If you think things are stale, wait a month. It's a very fun game, but the weird thing about Magic is that it's not exactly just one game. You see, Magic has these different formats. Think of them as game modes or rule sets. These formats can look very different from one another. There are certain people who just like to draft all day and fight with a new deck each time. There are people who like to play with older cards and a limited ban list so they can really crank the power level as far as it can go. More interesting are the formats that make additions or restrictions to the game in order to make it a funner experience. Recently, I've been getting into Commander, Magic's main casual format. This format is 4-player with 99 card decks, which basically ensures a highly variable, crazy fun experience each time, if you're doing it right. There are dozens of Magic formats, some ubiquitous, others quite niche, and what's cool about them is that most of them weren't actually created by the company that makes it. Most of them just sort of kind of arose from people trying to figure out how to make the game funner. And it's not just game mechanics that are fun, people are fun. Remember, Magic has a lot of formats where multiple people get to play at once. For a lot of people, Magic is simply a vector to hang out with their friends. There's a saying in the community that Magic is about the gathering. Let's cut the crap for a second. Magic is played by a lot of nerds, and if you're socially awkward and you have really no personality outside of your media consumption, it's really useful to have a card game to kind of help the social interface and have an immediate thing that you have in common with other people. Also, if you're like me and you're a social abomination who dropped out of college and moved back to their hometown and you want to meet people your own age, your options are essentially join a bunch of religious groups or go down to the card shop and start slinging spells with the other degenerates. Hard segue here. During this video, I've shown off a few cards, and you may have noticed that some of these cards look very, very nice, look very, very pretty. Some of them have art that looks drop-jaw gorgeous. Okay, funny story. So I personally got into Magic the Gathering because I found a YouTube channel that makes videos about the artists who make the art for the cards in Magic the Gathering. His name is Ristic Studies. You should actually go check him out. I'll put link in the description. Brilliant professional artists are paid to bring the worlds and characters of Magic to life, and there are people who interact with the game mainly through an appreciation of its art. These beautiful pieces are fundamental to illuminating the setting that this game takes place in, and that brings us to another way people appreciate Magic the Gathering: an appreciation of its story, and more importantly, an appreciation of its world building. If you listen to enough Magic the Gathering players talk, you'll hear them use the word flavor. And flavor, instead of referring to the taste of cardboard, refers to how the mechanics of a card, how it plays in the game, can combine with its art to flesh out this setting and world that the game takes place in. And yes, in case you're wondering, there is a content creator whose entire channel is focused on the flavor of the game. I will also link that guy in the description. Basically, flavor just means that the card acts in the game the way the thing it depicts acts in the world. This is essential for immersion. Many people describe Magic as a perfect fusion of chess and poker, taking the tactical aspect of the first with the luck, variance, and bluffing aspect of the latter, but we shouldn't discount the high fantasy the game is couched in. It might sound a little childish, but summoning giant monsters, slinging lightning bolts, and calling forth interdimensional wizards is fun all in its own. Like I said before, where artwork and storytelling meet is the world building of Magic the Gathering, which I personally think is like the best creative thing that happens in it. Magic takes place in a multiverse of different worlds, and while they started with bog standard Tolkien-esque fantasy, they eventually branched out into India-inspired techno-futurism, complete with its own cyberpunk repressive government. Maya civilization, except there's dinosaurs and vampire conquistadors with pirates and mermaids thrown in. A giant city planet ruled over by 10 crazy guilds featuring party demons, soldier angels, frog abominations, and those kids you knew in high school who were way too into Fight Club. Dragons fighting Mongol-inspired clans with time travel thrown in. Bloodborne! That's the funniest thing I can think of to describe Innistrad. Like, it's just Bloodborne. I mean, it did come out before Bloodborne, but you know what I'm saying? Just like people get immersed in the setting of a good video game or novel, there are those who are lost in the worlds of Magic the Gathering. I, myself, often am. One of the most intoxicating aspects of this game is getting immersed in its worlds, and especially the factions that live there. There are several planes like Ravnica and Tarkir that are run by factions that represent different ideologies while also reinforcing the mechanics of the game. This allows players to choose what side they're on, where they think they fit in, who their good guys and bad guys are. And at its best, this creates a welcoming, inclusive, and immersive experience. Also an expressive one. Hey, there's that concept. Again, there are certain players that enjoy the stories of these games, the legendary creatures that are our main characters, and you can see their triumphs and their failures, their story arcs, which actually happen over the course of several sets. Planeswalkers are beings who can show up in multiple sets over the course of multiple planes because they can, walk between them. These are the characters who appear year after year and are kind of our returning cast. Even way back in Magic's past, there was an epic story that played out over the course of the sets that still goes on today with a few retcons and continuity resets thrown in there over the years. Last April, we saw the release of War of the Spark, which featured a climax of between 3 to 5 years of storytelling, which actually ended in a somewhat poignant if cliche moment. Recently, the story has gotten a bit ass, and that's kind of a controversy right now, but I want to take a detour for a moment and talk about how cool it is, as a guy who really loves narrative and has written narratives, to talk about how cool it is to tell a story through a card game. See, each set has cards that tell certain parts of the story, but beyond that, you can use that flavor I mentioned before to reinforce how characters and factions work in the game and in the story. Take one of my favorite examples, Undercity Uprising. This is not a good card or competitive card. It doesn't actually even depict a canon story moment, but it is a brilliant execution of flavor. Our main character, the Medusa lady you can see in the middle, is Vraska, who has been a villain, anti-hero, or protagonist, depending on how you kind of see it over the course of the past few years of the Magic storyline. She's a bit brutal and morally gray, but she grew up viciously oppressed by a tyrannical government. After honing her abilities and spending some time as a pirate, Vraska has returned to her home plane to unite her people. See, Vraska has just become the Golgari Queen, and in this art we can see her standing side by side with the various factions that make up the Golgari Swarm. Disparate, oppressed by the central government, and forced to hide in the sewers in the underworld, this collection of liches, insect people, trolls, and just weird humans has never held central power, but Vraska has united them for the first time. Now, what this card does is it gives your creatures death touch, and it allows them to fight your opponent's creatures. What this means in a practical sense is that even your weakest critter can take down one of your opponent's strongest creatures. They may die in the process, and the war will be bloody, but maybe this time the Golgari will finally be able to get one over on their oppressors. The entire card is held together by that single line of flavor text. You can hear the bitterness in Vraska's voice as she says the line, "Now it's your turn to hide." So we've discussed the mechanics of the game, its appeal, its story, its world building, how fun it is to play with other people, and you probably yelled at your screen several times in the course of this video that this really isn't different to any other sort of video game or movie series fandom that you get into, and you would actually be right, but there's one last aspect of Magic that I want to talk about that, in my opinion, makes this game truly special. This right here is the most important aspect of Magic the Gathering. For many players, it will be the first thing about Magic that they ever see. It is also one of its oldest. Over the course of the many, many years of this game, the back of the card, that has never changed, despite the cards looking very, very different. The back has stayed the same. And that's because the back depicts the game's most important aspect. I am, of course, referring to these 5 dots, the color pie. These 5 dots are the foundation on which every single game of Magic has been played. At first, for players, the colors are just an extension of the game's rules. They symbolize its most fundamental factions and most basic play styles, each one balancing out the other 4 to make sure, ideally, one doesn't get out of control. But over the course of a Magic player's career, the colors will begin to mean so much more. For one, each color doesn't represent one individual play pattern, and each can be interpreted in different ways. There is such a thing as blue aggro and red control, but beyond that, the colors can represent whole ideologies. Red is the crash of emotions, rage, joy, sorrow, catharsis. It's the color most obsessed with speed, always charging forward to go faster. Blue is the study of logic and reason, always hungry for more information and then for the creativity to use it. Each of these colors aren't just one note. In fact, they're complex, sometimes even contradictory. Each color is capable of heroics and horrors, and you can mix them. What happens when you mix red and black? What about blue and green? Maybe throw in a splash of white. What happens then? Combining colors creates whole new worldviews and playstyles while also reinforcing the elements of its constituents. Eventually, each player will find a color combination they are most drawn to, one that not only reinforces and represents their preferred playstyle, but also their identity. In this way, Magic isn't just a game to play, it's a way for people to express themselves, to explore their feelings, their comfort zones. It's an expression of creativity through deck building and play choice, but there's also an element of self-discovery to it. These mechanics can help you learn stuff about yourself. For instance, my color is black. It is the one where I find the most identification in, as weird as that might sound. I think the fact that the deepest and most foundational aspects of Magic the Gathering allow players to express themselves is what has really sustained the game over all these years and what keeps bringing new players in. If you think any of this sounds interesting, Theros Beyond Death just came out. It's a new set. I think it's so far pretty good because Mono Black Devotion is a thing and I get to break people's legs. It's a perfect time to jump in either in your local store or Magic Arena. This is definitely not the channel to teach you about and get you into the game. People, do not be worried. This is not become Magic the Gathering channel. There will be a few more Magic the Gathering videos. The next video, the next big video essay, I'll just announce it, is going to be a counterpoint to this video and some of the suck-ass parts of the game. I thought that would be responsible and also interesting because the game kind of 2019 was well, if you're into Magic, you know. But anyway, if you want to get in the game, so I mentioned before I'm linking content creators. I will put down some of various different types in the description, and you should check those guys out. They're way more talented than I'll ever be. In the comments, tell me what exactly compels you to most to play Magic the Gathering. And also, if you're new or you haven't played Magic before, maybe tell me what about the game is most attractive to you. Maybe for veteran players, tell me your stories about how you got in, the friends that pulled you in, your first favorite cards. I'd love to hear it. Other than that, that is my Twitter. If you subscribe, that will give me a dopamine rush, and also I would be heavily honored if you shared this with people. That would be a great comment. Other than that, I have been Wyatt the Word Weaver, and y'all be good.